Hello, and thanks for joining us for this video case tip. I'm Brynne McBride of ABC for Health. Today, we're talking about retelling facts. We call it Play It Again, Sam, and it's more of a conversation on advocacy strategies and skills than it is a substantive training. But maybe you've encountered this situation, and our thinking has changed on this over the years. Maybe you've encountered a situation where you talk to a family or to a patient or a client, and they tell you a little bit about what's going on and what their questions are. And then you put a little space in between it and you talk to them a second time and say, why don't you refresh my memory? Why don't you tell me again what was going on and what some of the issues were? And you hear it a little differently the second time. Our thinking used to be that we didn't want families to have to tell their story over and over and over. They would talk to an intake specialist and tell their story, and then maybe get to a health benefit advocate and tell their story again, and maybe that got referred up the chain to someone because of some legal questions. They had to talk to an attorney, and then they had to tell their story all over again, which seemed inefficient. But we also learned that there was value in the repetition. We were learning something more the second or third time we heard that story. Now we're balancing this with efficiency. We don't want to have someone have to repeat their story just because we didn't take good notes and didn't hear it the first time. We might want someone to retell their story or a couple of the key facts to see if it sounds different the second time, to see if we learned anything new or if we gathered more facts. And you know, from your own experience, you tell a story once, it's a long story and you miss a couple things and you tell stuff that doesn't matter. And then by the time you retell that story to another friend or family member, you've kind of tightened up the story a bit and you remember a couple more of the key elements that were a little bit more important. This happens in the kind of conversations we're having with families all the time. We're gathering more facts, we're learning more, and in a lot of instances, we're clarifying the facts. Having someone tell their story the second time, if you can see the notes from the first conversation, it might make you think of a couple additional questions you might have to ask to get better information and better understanding from that story. So that's why our thinking has evolved and why we wanted to share it with you. Think of ways that when you're working with a family, keeping deadlines in mind and efficiency and the time that you have together on the phone with the family, if it's worth it to put a little space between the first conversation and a second conversation, or to have an intake specialist do the first call and then maybe you do the second call to clarify the conversation that happened before, and see if you hear anything different. See if the different intake personnel is an advocacy tip amongst itself. Again, try to balance that with good efficiency in the amount of time you have available and the amount of time the family or the patient has available. Avoid frustration of, I already told you this. That's a good opportunity to say, yeah, I do have the notes from our first conversation and I'm clarifying my understanding of some of the notes, and having you tell me this is really helping with that understanding. That only is as good as the notes that you have. So of course, a good advocacy tip is to keep really good notes on that conversation. Memorialize it if you have a client database or a system of keeping good records of conversations. And making sure that if you do put space in between conversations, that you're not forgetting to follow up with that family, that it is calendared or on a tickler, and that you will maintain that follow-up and not miss any key deadlines. Have this conversation with your staff and see what you think, and send us an email of any suggestions you might have. Is Play It Again, Sam a good idea? Or do you only want to hear a story once? You can weigh in on this as well. You can visit us at healthwatchwisconsin.org. If you're watching us on YouTube, you can like this and go ahead and share it or subscribe to our channel. Thanks for joining us.